Yeah, not ideal. The main feeling I think from most people was just extreme frustration at the complete lack of organisation, not just from JFK and the airlines, but the fact that one fire could take out the third busiest airport in the world is absolutely insane, and it needs to be addressed.
So, live now to Stephen Arundel, Vice Chair of the Emergency Planning Society. Stephen, thank you for being with us on World Business Report. It does feel insane, doesn't it, that this could have happened today? I mean, you obviously are much closer to this kind of thing than the rest of us, though. Is it insane to you?
Good afternoon. It is and it isn't. So we understand risks really well in the UK, and we have a national risk register. We then have a regional risk register, and then we have local risk registers. And I have no doubt whatsoever that Heathrow Airport were cognizant of the risks of the disruption to electrical supply to the airport, and I'm quite sure that they've got processes and systems in place in some elements of their business, for example, the runways, for example, air traffic control, where they'll have backup generators and really resilient, high levels of redundancy within their systems to support aircraft safety and to support the safety and the security of the site. I think here what we've got is the challenge of site-wide power loss, and actually how realistic did the risk assessment process think that that would be, and what mitigations were put in place by the regulator, by the utility providers, and also by the airport operator owner itself. Emergency planners, as professionals, are working all the time to develop organisations to be high reliability organisations, and I'm quite sure that those emergency planners in the airlines, in local government, within the airport infrastructure organisation themselves, would have been championing risks like this.
It's all about risk management. So either the people whose job this is have looked at this possibility and thought it was unlikely and therefore not worth having a plan for, or there were all sorts of backup plans which didn't work. Do we know which it is yet?
We don't yet. And what's really important, and one thing that we are very good here in the UK about doing, is learning and identifying learning, but then also embedding that learning back into organisations. And that's also where emergency planners are absolutely fantastic at taking that learning, developing the strategies to make sure that organisations, and especially senior leaders and those who own the risks at the organisational level and are accountable, learn those lessons so that they can reinvent them back into the business, back into the organisation to help prevent this in the future. We learned an awful lot as a society from COVID, but that was a big distraction from those other risks that are available to threaten businesses and organisations.
Stephen, thank you. That's Stephen Arundel from the Emergency Planning Society with us live. Now here's Shanti Kellerman, Chief Investment Officer from M&G Wealth. Shanti, thank you for being with us. Has this had any impact on Heathrow itself, on the airlines that use Heathrow in the markets today?
Yeah, so it has had a big impact on International Consolidated Airlines Group, which is the owner of British Airways. British Airways far and away has the most, terminals and slots at Heathrow. So the impact on airlines, such as an EasyJet, United, those types is just a lot lower.
Okay,
So their shares were down about 2.5% right now.
And I guess as the days of disruption continues, we might see a bit more of that. While we've been on the air, Donald Trump has been talking in the White House in the Oval Office. He still is now. One thing he's announced is the awarding of a big contract to build fighter jets to Boeing, a company that's had all kinds of difficulties. What's the impact of that been in the last few minutes?
So that's been taken quite positively. Shares of Boeing were up about 5% after the news. The alternative company that could have received it was Lockheed Martin. They make a lot of the existing jets. Their shares have fallen. I think the issue with some of these really big defense companies is that they almost are too big to fail because the government does rely on them for so much. Boeing has been in a lot of financial distress lately, and in a way, the US government probably needs to help them continue to get through it, because would they to collapse or have continued difficulties, that would be a difficult thing for the US government to overcome.
No, interesting. I was going to ask if it was an intentional step to support Boeing. Sounds like it is. Nike is a brand that a lot of people listening to us are familiar with. What's happening with them?
They've had a lot of struggles the past few years with just, the athletic leisure and athletics is incredibly competitive industry. Their shares have fallen about 60% since November 2021, their peak. Their latest outlook was continue to be a bit negative. They have lots of plants in places like Mexico that will get hit by tariffs. But what they're trying to do is clear out a lot of their existing inventory so they can make space for new things to come in. And that means discounts and lower profits probably in the short term. So their shares were down about 7% today.
Interesting to see what's happening. Thank you very much indeed, Shanti. Shanti Kellerman is from M&G Wealth. If you're interested in what's happening at Heathrow, either as an onlooker or if you're caught up in it, there's a live page right now for you at bbc.com/news. The latest there, thousands of people still stranded in different parts of the world by the shutdown of Heathrow Airport today, as the British government says there are questions to answer about the fire that knocked out airport power and the airport's response to it. More at bbc.com/news. From me, Andrew Peach, and the team here on World Business Report, thank you for being with us, and thanks for listening to the BBC World Service.
This is the BBC World Service, and in the forum...
If we could access almost everything ever written, would it be a utopian dream? Or could it be
a nightmarish infinite labyrinth that contains every combination of letters, except it's all gibberish?
We'll be discussing that and more as we consider the role of the public library in the digital age.
The Forum, Sunday at 3 GMT. At bbcworldservice.com, The Media Show, with Ros Atkins and Katie Razzle.
As President Trump targets federal funding, we look at the impact on some of America's international broadcasters.
Critics say this is an attack on the free press. Those in support say it's action on government waste. We'll hear both perspectives.
This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Welcome to OS on the BBC World Service with me, Mark Lowen, live from our London newsroom. It's being called the world's worst humanitarian crisis, the civil war that has torn apart Sudan for the past 2 years, leading to the death of 150,000 people, driving 12 million from their homes and leaving millions facing catastrophic hunger. Now the Sudanese army has recaptured the presidential palace in the capital Khartoum, dealing a major blow to their paramilitary enemies, the Rapid Support Forces. The RSF say they are still close by and launched a drone attack today on the palace that killed several people. Could Sudan be heading to de facto partition? And what of the allegations that the RSF is being backed by outside countries, including the United Arab Emirates? On today's OS, we'll hear from Sudanese civilians watching or caught up in this war and hear from our Africa correspondent. Is there any hope of stopping the horror? First, a bulletin of BBC News.
I'm Debbie Russ with the BBC News. Hello. The International Airlines Organisation, IATA, says the fire at an electricity substation that caused the closure of London Heathrow Airport raises serious questions about why the international hub was dependent on a single power source. It called it another case of Heathrow letting down passengers and airlines. Rich Preston is at Heathrow Airport.
Heathrow is a huge transport hub. It's the airport that handled the most international connections in the world last year. It is Europe's busiest airport, and that's just passengers. When you talk about cargo, it handled 48% of the UK's air cargo last year. Everything from fruit and veg to live animals and medicines. So the idea that one fire knocked out the entire airport is leaving many people, frankly, baffled.
Reconfiguration of the grid has restored partial power. Sudan's army has strengthened its position in the capital Khartoum after its capture of the presidential palace from the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. Though some RSF units remain in the city, its presence is greatly diminished. Videos showed army soldiers celebrating inside the palace. Israel has continued to attack targets in Gaza, with its defence minister threatening to occupy permanently parts of the territory if Hamas refuses to release its remaining hostages. Yisrael Katz said the longer the militants held out, the more land would be seized. Yolande Nell is in Jerusalem.
The Israeli Defence Minister indicates that Palestinians could be ordered to move from the north to the south of the territory once again. Hamas, meanwhile, has stated that it remains deeply involved in ceasefire and hostage release talks and is considering different ideas put forward, including one from the US, with the goal of ending the war. A UN official has warned it's now the longest period since the start of the war in 2023 that no supplies have been allowed into Gaza, and says this is reversing progress made during the ceasefire.
President Erdogan of Turkey's warned that he won't tolerate threats to public order following 2 days of protests about the arrest of his main rival, Ekrem İmamoğlu. Mr Erdogan said Turkey wouldn't give in to what he called vandalism and street terror. The opposition CHP party has urged supporters to hit the streets. Emily Wither is in Istanbul.
President Erdogan said the street that the CHP are talking about is a dead-end street. This is street terrorism, which is a very clear warning to protesters. The government has banned public demonstrations and gatherings for the next couple of days. That's now been extended into next week, and we are seeing quite a heavy police crackdown. That warning, calling it terrorism, suggests that there will be more arrests on the streets as well if people go out and protest.
World News from the BBC. President Trump has awarded the contract for a next-generation fighter jet to the Boeing Corporation. He said experimental versions of the F-47 had been flying secretly for 5 years. Mr Trump said it was equipped with advanced stealth technology and could cooperate with swarms of drones. A court in Zimbabwe has dismissed an appeal to release a journalist arrested in connection with broadcasts of press conferences critical of the president. The authorities say the press conferences by war veterans who fought for Zimbabwe's independence incited violence. The journalist, Blessed Mhangla, denies wrongdoing. Shingai Nyoka reports from Harare.
The High Court ruling will keep Blessed Mhlanga behind bars while he waits for a trial date. The judge rejected his appeal against a lower court decision to deny bail on the grounds that he would likely interfere with witnesses, abscond or reoffend. Mhlanga was arrested late February after the private TV station where he works broadcast press conferences critical of President Emmerson Mnangagwa. A group of war veterans accused the president of corruption and mismanagement and called on him to resign. Rights groups have condemned Mhlanga's arrest as an attempt to intimidate and silence journalists.
South Korea's foreign minister has asked for his Chinese counterpart's help in easing troubled relations with North Korea. Wang Yi has not responded publicly, though he said China's position towards the two Koreas hadn't changed. For decades, China was the reclusive North's main supplier of aid and its top trading partner. Iceland's Minister for Children has resigned after admitting she had a child with a teenager more than 30 years ago. Ásthildur Lóa Þórsdóttir said in a media interview she'd started a relationship when the boy was 15 and she was a 22-year-old counsellor at a religious group which he attended. She gave birth to his child when he was 16. BBC News.
Hello and a very warm welcome to OS on the BBC World Service with me, Mark Lowen, broadcasting live from the heart of the BBC's newsroom here in central London. And from where I'm sitting here at our OS desk in the heart of the newsroom, I can see the bank of screens in front of me bringing live pictures into this building, and a couple of them which we call OS screens, outside source, from where the name of this programme comes, are of varying views of Heathrow Airport, the world's second busiest airport and Europe's busiest airport, which is completely grounded today because of that fire in an electrical substation in West London, which feeds the airport. I can see the smoke still, or the whispers of smoke still coming out of that fire station on one screen, and on another screen, all the planes completely grounded on the airport, around the airport runway. It reminds me a little bit of what we lived through during the COVID pandemic, pandemic when people were not allowed to travel. Extraordinary scenes there at Heathrow and massive international travel disruption from that story. We will cover that a little bit later on OS, so stay with us for that. But we're going to start this half hour in a very different part of the world, in Northeast Africa, and the ongoing civil war in Sudan. Now, the war started in 2023 between the Sudanese army and a paramilitary group called the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. The RSF controls large parts of the country, but today the army has said it has retaken the presidential palace in the centre of the Sudanese capital, Khartoum. Their troops filmed themselves in the palace. Let's bring in our senior reporter, Akiza Wandera, who is in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, monitoring the situation in Sudan. Hi, Akiza. Just bring us the latest on that takeover of the palace and where the RSF troops now are.
Hi, so it's been a day of victory for the Sudanese army that has been steadily making advances in various parts of Sudan, including the capital, Khartoum, and the recapture of the presidential palace in the capital, Khartoum, is a very significant moment. There are still reports of intense battles in Khartoum as both sides continue to claim victory in various areas. The Sudanese army is trying to weed out or to push out RSF fighters who are still in various neighborhoods within Khartoum as they try and claim the whole capital, which will be a very critical juncture in this particular war that nears 2 years.
But the RSF say that they are nearby and that they fired onto the palace, I understand.
Yes, that's the claim that RSF made almost immediately after the Sudanese army said they had recaptured the presidential palace, and sharing images, and we've seen images and videos of Sudanese army soldiers celebrating. The RSF said that they had launched a drone attack on the presidential palace, killing at least 3 people. And there are reports that the victims include crew members or journalists from a local TV station. The attack came just hours after the military regained the control of the palace, but it still remains unclear whether the soldiers or the military personnel that were inside the palace taking over were harmed in any way in that particular strike. But of course, the RSF has also focused on rallying its members and its soldiers, saying that this is not a time to be down, saying that the recapture of the presidential palace does not in essence mean the end of the war, just urging their forces on, saying that they will still retake large swaths of land in Sudan.
Akisa, just remind us of the origins of this civil war, how it broke out, and also of the devastating toll that it has taken on Sudan.
Well, so it's been 2 years of fighting between the RSF and the Sudanese army. These are two groups that worked very well under the former president Omar Bashir. But when the Sudanese army wanted to co-opt the paramilitary